I actually made a list of 100. I have a list of 100 people on Google Docs. I'm like, I will not stop until I interview every single one of these people.
Dude, that's awesome. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really cool because like I know there was like a little bit of a hiatus. I know you took like a little bit of a social media detox to kind of like center yourself on things, and that's really cool because with the whole working online thing, it's really easy to kind of blur that line between am I actually working or am I just like scrolling on social media for no reason.
Oh,
At least I
100%.
struggle with that, yeah.
100%. Like adding value rather than just adding noise,
Hmm. Like am I
because
actually like producing and not just consuming or something of that nature?
yeah, I was talking to Steve about this. Um, it's a lot of people who like are influencers or they're trying to like make a living online or they're trying to like build a brand or whatever. It's kind of like this weird like social media has kind of trained people to be like, look at me. What can I get out of you guys?
Hmm.
That makes sense. Like it's like a take. But like in reality, like economics and like business, like you're supposed to add value to the marketplace in order to extract value. Like I offer you value, then I get value in return. But
Exactly, yeah.
social media is just like take. Do you see it that way?
Yeah, for the most part. And that's why it's kind of difficult for me because, like, obviously, I want YouTube and online coaching to be my main source of income. But every now and then, I'm just like, do I really want to play this algorithm game? And to be honest, like, part of it is I don't chalk all of it up to the like algorithm and that ethereal thing that exists out there
Hmm.
because, at the end of the day, I truly see that the algorithm is just people, like, is your content people friendly? Is it like attractive to them for them to click on? So I don't blame the algorithm for anything or like cited, but it's like this weird thing that I have absolutely no control over. But at the same time, like when I watch I try my hardest to like absolutely avoid most social media content just because it's not really made for me. First and foremost, it's made for people who like are just trying to have like shut their brain off and have a good time. And I my idea of a good time is actually like pretty different. It actually is like I can rewatch videos of, people like Paris Butler, Coach Baldami, man, like just talking about training for like hours and think I'm having a great time. Like I'm having
Yeah.
a blast doing that, So,
Every time I
um,
see, yeah, there's a difference between, um, like that's what's refreshing about content creators that just offer a lot of value. It's like,
mhm,
oh wow, it's not just like this flashy 2 second look at me video.
mhm.
But yeah, I'm like you. Whenever I see someone put out a video, it's like, oh, a 2.5 hour long video on a very specific niche topic.
Mhm,
Yes.
mhm. Yeah, it's like this is for me. This is it. I'm having a great day tonight. Like every now and then I'll watch something that is made more so for the lay person or a specific niche of lay people. And for example, this one happened pretty recently with Manny Pacquiao. Like I don't know if you heard of like the most people haven't because it wasn't marketed well. The Manny Pacquiao just did an exhibition match with this guy called DKU. And DKU is a martial arts charlatan and um he got maybe one good punch in because it's striking, it's boxing, it's like the way I describe boxing when because I do teach boxing like in person, and something I tell people is like it's like basketball. The other team is going to score, like whether or not, like obviously the better team is always going to win, but it's really really rare to have someone to just like completely shut out in that sport. Same thing applies to boxing. Like I have sparred with some really high level people. I can never beat them in 100 years, but yeah, I for sure touch them in the face every now and then with my glove. That's just the nature of the sport. But this guy, immediately after getting his ass whooped for 4 rounds, he puts up a picture of that one punch he landed and be like, yeah, guys, buy my stuff. And I'm just like,
Oh man.
that's the one thing I kind of dislike about a lot of like social media content is because when it comes to guys like Paris Butler and like Ball Nami Man, even for me, I really enjoy actually watching like guys like NH, GVS, and those guys. When it comes to them, it's because they have a personality.
Yeah.
It's they have a personality. They are not a personality. Like they're not a character. They're not like trying to
Mhm.
put on a specific or highlight a specific part of them, or even if it is an actual part of them. They're just kind of like turning on the camera and just letting things flow. And I kind of
Yeah.
appreciate that. Like it just makes it more watchable for me because when it comes to like all those other things, like when people have like a character on and everything like that, if there is a video that for whatever reason just like spikes my monkey brain. I just want to watch it. I'll skip all that like stuff and like before that point where they're just pretending to be engaged or whatever.
Mhm. Yeah, it's refreshing when, you know, we live in such an overly curated
Hmm.
world with social media that when you find someone who just like turns on the camera, doesn't edit a damn thing, is just like
Hmm.
lets it roll, just is completely who they are. It's really
Hmm.
really refreshing.
Definitely. And like, I'm a sucker for good editing to be fair. And like in some of my videos, I actually like decided to put a little bit of the editing in only
Mhm.
because I find it a bit more effective for how I want to convey my sense of humor.
Yeah.
Because I'm for the longest time on YouTube Fitness, or at least when I started my channel, at least I've kind of just presented myself as a bit more serious, I guess, to be a bit more on that professional side of things. But in total complete honesty, that's not how I am at all in person. Like I'm very incredibly like goofy gym bro kind of guy. So I was just like, but I'm also kind of quiet on the quiet side of things. I'm very introverted. So when I'm with
Mhm.
my friends and with my close friends and whatnot, like I'm, the monkey of the group, I guess. And um when it comes to editing, like I like using it as just a means to show that sense of humor, because if I like
Yeah.
try to tell a joke, it kind of falls flat. But I'm just like, I'm sure I could find a way to make it even better.
Yeah, for sure. Like even just the thumbnails, and you do
Hmm.
have, I think the humor helps, man, because you're talking about a top, you know, the information is serious, as in it's good information that should be taken seriously.
Hmm.
But in the context of like you saying something like like the humor like helps it along, you know, keeps people, then they start to like, you know, they're into your personality at that point. Like, because anybody can like just kind of regurgitate information, but you have to kind of put it in a package that's, you know, I think that's why Jeffrey is so, why a lot of his content really lands, because he just adds like even just hilarious little edits that he puts in.
Yeah,
It's
for sure.
just enough to make it, because like any just boring, bland person can come on the internet and they're never gonna, yeah, you have to like, I don't know. I guess that's where the marketing comes in. You know, like
Mhm.
your personality has to shine.
Right. I mean, there are examples of people who are like in this space, like who are incredibly bland and boring, but yet they somehow have like one of
Yeah,
the bigger followings.
yeah, that's fair
And
actually. Yeah.
like, like marketing definitely, like one thing I kind of do though is like, or kind of believe is that, people are gonna like what they like. And sometimes it's just a matter of, did the person say it in a way that you can understand? And
Mhm.
like for example, like, most people can watch a Jeff Nippard video and like, take something away from it. But sometimes like even when I watch those, it's just like for some reason like there is a disconnect for me. But then I watch like a 300-pound strong man and he just says it in a very simplistic way. I'm just like, that's me. So I think that's one of the reasons why Jeffrey has like blown up and well deserved. It's because he finds a way to put things in a way that's intellectual, but then he can also do so in such a way that's like, incredibly like bro as well. Because
Mhm.
in my opinion, you need both. In the video I just released, I referenced like Rocky versus Ivan Drago. Like Rocky, like in that movie, he was just training in all the suboptimal ways as possible, but he had all the heart and grit in the world, and he toppled the dude who was on drugs and doing the optimal training. Now, my thing is this though. Let's say you take Rocky with all that heart in the world and you give him like, let's say, whatever optimal is. I don't think optimal is this ethereal thing. I think optimal is a refinement process. And
Mhm.
you like can find all those ways that he himself could have trained better, and he applied that same amount of heart, effort, and grit and just attacking his training. Oh, he'd be unstoppable 100%. So it's, for me, it's not an either or of do you have heart and effort in your training, or do you have like the brains behind it? That's why I think one of the podcasts that's coming up right now is like kind of cool. Is like Brains and Gains podcast. Is like, yeah, you need both. Like
Mhm.
one of the things I'm working on right now as a project kind of captures that. I'll share it with you too. Like it's one of the businesses I'm starting up pretty soon, so I'll share that
Yeah,
with
for
you
sure. Yeah, I'd love to
after.
see it.
Yeah, it's really sick. It's something I'm really proud of, and it kind of captures that, because I think now when it comes to training, like I think we're becoming incredibly smart lifters, and I think that's beautiful because for the longest time, a lot of the things we had was not really all that great. However, with that being said, because of that lack of knowledge, we just kind of had a level of, comfort with things not being perfect. And the things we did try to perfect were those more internal factors. Like, for example, I remember when I first started losing weight, my workout program was, I'm going to run a mile every morning and then swim for 30 minutes. Like, I had no questions about, is this optimal for fat loss? Am I gonna lose muscle doing this? Like the amount of questions I had relating to that were just so limited that I just didn't even care. And by the end of it, like I still looked great anyway. So I was just like, why does this even matter? Like sometimes I kind of like get into my own way when I start making like new plans and new goals. I just think to myself, like, I don't even think this matters in the long term. Why am I overthinking? And I just like go do it and just see what happens. And I think it's important to have both, like to be able to like, have your like be an empty cup, and then but at the same time also know when your cup is full. Like
Well, that's something that I've been thinking about a lot is becoming inundated with information and just overthinking. You were saying like maybe when we were growing up, we didn't have the best information. Like we weren't as connected as we are now. So, you can go on the internet and get as much information. Like the information's out there. Like if you want to know something, you can find it out. But it almost kind of like takes away from you kind of self-discovering, I guess, or, just doing something like putting in the heart and soul first. Yeah, it's something I've been thinking about a lot is do you want to touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, that's why like one of my things, like when it comes to like through the video I just posted was a self-coaching video. I was heavily inspired by like Baldami Man's like self-coaching videos and how he kind of handles his content as well. The main thing I want people to take away from that video is trust yourself. Like trust yourself with your training. Like no one is going to know you better than yourself, like ever. So you have to kind of give yourself the tools to learn more about yourself in a meaningful way. And a coach is going to be incredibly useful in that, but you don't need one. Most of my training career has been done without one. But now that I'm a little bit more intermediate and I want to kind of take it to that next level, I find it incredibly useful that I now have coaches who are in my corner and helping me. But when it comes to training and whatnot, like you just really have to trust yourself. Like, yes, the information is out there. Like my way of looking at it is like, there's all these ways that you can like, like have all these dots on the board. But if you can't connect any of them in a meaningful way that gets you in the direction you want to go, it's all meaningless. That's why like one of my main things I tell people is just like, don't learn more than you can actually apply. Like, and be okay with that. Like there were times where I myself like was starting to learn things about conjugate, West Side, and whatnot, and I just kept telling myself like, okay, I'm studying this, but like let's not implement any of these just quite yet, because I still am running a previous like line of thought when it came to training at the time. And I was just like, if I just distract myself from it, I'm not going to get anything out of it. I'm not going to get anything out of both of these things, and I'm just going to think both of them suck for me, and it's not worthwhile. Like you kind of have to commit yourself to it for a while. Like that's the downside to a lot of things in life. It's like you actually have to commit yourself to it for a pretty long time before you can even make a valid or rational decision about, is it good for me or not.
I have
sometimes go ahead.
Sorry, I have a bit of a personal story with that too. It's when I was, I'm nowhere near, I was focusing on, or I was following certain people that were preaching the like the very biomechanics focused stuff that was like, do your single arm lat pull instead of whatever, like the optimal hypertrophy movements. And I had no business implementing any of that because none of my, I was not anywhere near, I wasn't in like, I didn't have the training experience to start implementing some of that stuff. Like I need to get stronger on pull-ups. I need to get stronger on just basic movements. But I kind of like was listening to all these biomechanics gurus and being like, well, actually I'm going to start. So I'm sitting there doing like one arm cable rows. And in reality, I'm like not fucking strong and I'm not very big. That's like, like even like, and I'm not saying like all that shit is invalid, but it's like, that's the kind of stuff that you implement after you've been training for a long time.
Right.
And stuff that you maybe just do to like, the cherry on top of just like the basic foundation training.
Right. Yeah.
That's something that happened to me.
Yeah. And like, what's interesting now, so I live in Las Vegas, and there is a big gym. Like a lot of people are like, they post pictures there all the time. A lot of like pro bodybuilders go to this gym on the regular. And, I see them do that exercise. And I see them do like those single arm stuff. Like, don't get me wrong. Yeah, just that stuff. But here's the thing. Like your arms are looking nice, dude. Like,
I was like, oh, I look pretty good right now.
Yeah, man. Just like, get that in there, bro. But I see them do that exercise And the way they perform that exercise is so worlds apart from how any of these biomechanically optimal gurus do it. So I'm just like, the thing is, they they have the wherewithal, the mindset of how to actually apply the things and how to actually get something out of it, and they have a reason for it too. It's kind of like, well, I am so strong, like their backs are so fucking huge and so strong that if they tried to do another more conventional movement, another muscle group would take over. But that's not the weakness they're trying to address. So as a result, they need to do these more isolated pinpoint exercises. But
Mhm.
if you have um the if you just are weak everywhere, like you're
Yeah.
just overall weak,
So
you
pretty
kind
much
of
that's how I
most
feel.
people, yeah.
I feel that right now.
Hey, me too. Like we're on the way up. So there's a lot of times people are just kind of unwilling to accept the more relevant and the more like in front of them goal, because they're just like, oh, that's the either for a couple other reasons. One, they're like, maybe, oh, that's too old school, it's not new, it's not this, right?
Mhm.
Sometimes I encounter that. Other times they're just like, well, I tried that and it didn't work then, so it's not going to work now. um, or they think to themselves like, what's like, they'll find any amount of excuses to just avoid those things, and like they kind of imagine themselves above it. But my thing is, if you're not hitting your goal, if you're not getting what you actually want out of training, and there's something you are neglecting, then that is, in my opinion, the first place to look, because you actually can see it. Like
Mhm.
whenever with everything else that they're trying to find out there, they're thinking to themselves, "Oh, I'm going to discover a new way to train. I'm going to discover an exercise that works for me. I'm going to learn this new knowledge that's coming out thanks to science,
Yeah.
and I'm going to be a bigger, better lifter." There's something like they don't know about, they're not aware of, and they think that's what's going to be the answer, when it's just like, hey man, like, what a pull-up is, and you can't do them,
Mhm.
so maybe we should address that.
Yeah. It's kind of like people that claimed like have some new fancy diet that's gonna
Hmm.
fix all their problems, but in reality, they just need to eat like fruits, vegetables, meat, eat in a calorie deficit or whatever they eat for their goal. Just do the basic
Hmm.
day in, day out shit. But
Right,
a
yeah.
lot of people are looking for something like an easy. They almost try to like intellectualize themselves out of hard work, I guess you could say, or
Hmm.
they're getting lost in the sauce.
Yeah. And what's even crazier now is that because of the whole um, culture and the long history we have established with the whole science based kind of phenomenon that's honestly pretty exclusive to the health and fitness industry, we're starting to like try to like intellectualize really weird things. Like, I mean, the Liver King was a huge example of that. But I think it's kind of funny because now you kind of see memes of people clowning on them. Like, for example, there's this one meme where it's just like this dude, like he's holding a stick out in the middle of nowhere, and just says like, people aren't supposed to eat once a day. And then and then you look in the comments, it's like someone didn't have a good harvest, and then like someone didn't plant their seeds right. And then just like,
he's, he's
people are
just
trying
getting
to,
trolled.
yeah, just getting trolled. And I kind of appreciate about that, like our culture, like like now where you know I think it's necessary, and I think it's cool that we have people of different thought processes and opinions, because sometimes they'll stumble upon something that's like gold. They might not know why it's gold. They might not know like the actual good of it. But then, like, the more people kind of play with it, experiment with it, and everything like that. Like, my thing is, you shouldn't just shut the door on things. Like, you
Yeah.
should explore it a little bit and like come to a conclusion. And it takes a long time to get there. You're not going to have like, you can't make any sexy statements like, I know something. Like, that's kind of why I decided to shift my major to a philosophy major, because with any other degree, right, you are kind of being told this is the way, this is the truth, and like this is how things are, right?
Mhm.
Everything that you are studying, everything that you are told is a kind of like a given. Whereas with philosophy, you're supposed to be more of a skeptic. Now, you're not supposed to be a cynic. Like, being cynical is like actually like heavily frowned upon in philosophy, because it's just like intellectual laziness. But you're supposed to, like, anything that someone ever tells you, you're just like, okay, show me, prove it to me, give me good reason to believe that. And the cool thing about being a philosophy major is that it's the only degree where if you get it, you actually are, for a lack of better words, less smart, because there's less things but there's just more things that you can think about, and there's more ways that you can approach things, and you can understand yourself and the ways you think like a bit better. because you know, with psychology, for example, which is what most people think is like so much better, dude, I could probably ask you a couple of questions and diagnose you with a mental illness of some kind,
Oh
and
yeah,
like make you
I
fit to at least 3 other mental
I feel
illnesses,
like
you know.
modern psychology is a fucking I don't know. I don't like pop psychology, man. It's a fucking joke. Like
Hmm.
everyone's has a mental illness. Like
Hmm.
it's like everyone can be diagnosed with some shit so they can sell you pills. It's like
Hmm.
that's I don't know. I don't like that shit. Obviously, like not all psychologists. Like
Yeah, not all psychologists are like
no,
that
it's
for sure.
just
Like,
like it's like the Instagram psychology pages that you see.
mhm,
It's like shut
right.
up.
Right, right. Or someone who read maybe one book from like 1992 or something, you know. It's
Yeah.
like one thing that's why I decided to get a philosophy major. I'm just like, hey, I know full well that the job prospects for this might not be the best, but you know, like I found it interesting. I found it worthwhile. And honestly, if I'm not going to fall asleep in class, I might as well do this. So that's why I kind of went that route.
Yeah. So what actually like what was like the first kind of like the catalyst that made you really interested in that stuff? Like
Yeah, so I've been interested in philosophy for quite a long time, but to be completely honest, it was that whole like pop philosophy thing where just it sounds cool, it sounds manly, you know. Like there's a
mhm,
reason why like fitness and philosophy kind of go hand in hand is because it fucking sounds cool. Like when it comes to a lot of the dope philosophical quotes, they it sounds like they're talking to guys like us, guys who work hard, guys who train, guys who like put themselves through discipline and stuff like that, because those are
mhm.
things that philosophy has traditionally valued, and I mean more like continental philosophy. So there's two kind of different ones. There's analytic, which is more like, you know, American, where it's just like logic, like facts and logic, right? That's more analytic philosophy. Continental is more so what most people are familiar with. So things like Stoicism, Epicureanism,
Yeah.
existentialism, like more those topics. So analytic is more about like more how do we know what we know? How can we justify our beliefs and whatnot? Whereas continental is more so like what is the meaning of life? What does a good man do? Like things like that, right?
Yeah,
So
that's the kind that I've been really interested in.
mhm,
I don't know like the technicalities of it. Like
mhm,
if you were to ask me like to define stoicism, like I can give you my definition, but I know that
mhm.
there's some of those people that are into philosophy, they have like very specific definitions and
Right. And
yeah.
what's cool too with the philosophy is one thing I appreciate about it is like, let's say you define stoicism and then I define stoicism. All right, cool. They might be different. And it's not, and one thing too is like I will never say, well, it's true for you, but it's not true for me. That's bullshit. Like I hate that line of thinking. That's relativistic thinking. Doesn't matter. Like this, it's just false on day one, you know? The thing is like, but what happens is this, you have to provide me reasons to buy your definition. Like to buy into your definition, to make me think that your definition makes sense, that it addresses everything that stoicism somehow captures. And that's what's cool about philosophy. And if a person can't do that for me, I'm just like, well, you might be onto something, but you know, your thought process is incomplete.
Mhm.
Or maybe you're a charlatan. Like maybe you're just doing like pop philosophy. And that's something that kind of bothers me about a lot of stuff out there. Because for me, like when it comes to I think the internet lifting community has a kind of like a hard on for stoicism, like honestly, and they kind of just accept it as like truth. But then you kind of like, but then there's still issues that I feel like are kind of not addressed by it. First and foremost, like people who are in the health and fitness industry, we have some of the most disordered eating possible. And but one of the key tenets of stoicism is to live in accordance with nature. A lot of the things we do is like just inherently unnatural. So as a result, that's why I kind of like me personally, I would consider myself more so an existentialist, because the difference is with stoicism, you're told live in accordance with nature, like you know, your logic and your rationale and your reasoning can overcome your passions, and that's what gives you true virtue and true peace in life. And I think that there's a lot of beautiful lessons within stoicism, but there's a lot of places where you can kind of challenge that. And for me, it's just like, well, if you are not at peace in your own spirit, even if you are practicing all these virtues and values and you still lack that inner peace, you will actually be more disturbed, because you'll think to yourself like, I have all this discipline, but I'm not actually getting anywhere close to what I think is a good version of me. And now you're even in more of a state of chaos. And that's because you neglected things like your passions, things like that which is authentically you. Because in my opinion,
Mhm.
that's the beauty of being a human person. You are something
It's
that
kind of hitting home right now.
yeah, you know, that's why like when it comes to like I love stoicism, don't get me wrong, I love all these philosophical ways of thinking because they all have brought us to like where we can kind of think about things now. And
Oh, we lost
um
you.
Yeah, that was a. The world doesn't want you to hear this message. It wants you to be complicit and docile and
I was like, we just broke the internet, bro.
right. This message is too positive.
Okay, well, we're still recording. I'm not sure what happened. I think either my Wi-Fi or your Wi-Fi just shit the bed.
Yeah, right. I mean, hopefully, like, yeah.
Where were we at though? What was the last thing you were saying before it cut out?
What I
We're
recall.
talking about Stoicism.
Yeah, Stoicism and like existentialism and like the reason why I bring it up is because it's the one most people are familiar with. You know, I'm not shitting on Stoicism because I think it's bad. I'm just bringing it up because it's the one most people have the most experience and exposure to. And as I was mentioning, it's like with existentialism, the authentic human being is the ideal human being in my perception. And if you are now, granted, there's all like, you know, someone's gonna be like, well, if I'm authentically a mass murderer, it's just like, shut up. Like we're not talking about those like extreme fringe cases. We're talking about like people who are sane, people who are rational and whatnot, right? But it's kind of like if someone were to ask you what is virtuous, and you can provide a good argument for what is virtuous. Now, if someone were to ask you that virtuous thing you brought up, that virtuous thing you just argued on behalf of, if you had to do that like every single lifetime for multiple lifetimes again and again and again, would you still do that thing? And then like, let's say for example, like even what's a good job? What's like you're a nurse, you're a doctor, like you identify that to be a good job. It's good for your family, it's good for your community and all of these things, right? And then someone asks you like, okay, if you had to relive your life multiple times over and over and over again, would you still do it? The Stoic would have, if the whole thing is to be virtuous and to be good for you, your family, and your community, there would be no reason for you not to be a doctor. But an existentialist would say, well, you know, thank God for other people who have that in them to be doctors, but I want to do something else. And that's totally fine. Your passions, the things that you are enthusiastic about, the thing that give you purpose and calling in life, those are things that actually matter. And even if they are, let's say, not within what is considered the natural world, who cares? Like, thank God for the people who are able to do those things. But if that's not you, forcing yourself to do so would only make yourself miserable, and it would cause the fruits of your labor to be less rewarding. So I think it's kind of worthwhile and to investigate other things, and you can appreciate other trains of thought. You can appreciate other arguments presented by other philosophies, and sometimes they do contradict and make you doubt your own, but that's a good thing in philosophy. Like, whereas in any other like intellectual pursuit, if someone says a blatant lie, like you have like you just say like, oh, you're full of shit, and then you just like walk away. Whereas in philosophy, like you can kind of entertain these things and just like, and then you can kind of like just tear something apart, and it's kind of fun to do, on all honesty. It's so, you know, if you're a bit of a shithead like myself, like, and you kind of enjoy that kind of stuff, like it's rewarding in that way. But yeah, the job prospects kind of not there.
Fair enough. Well, that kind of ties into, you were talking about like Stoicism, and or you're also talking about, you know, chasing or following your passions, and that being very important. You know, you don't, for me, like that's even something in my life where you know, I had like a little bit of a hiatus with the YouTube channel, and it was mostly because like I'm in this spot now where I'm like really like financially focused. So what I'm doing in like my day-to-day is like money focused, to the point where it was just like I was almost like shaving off like parts of myself in order to like fit this like money making version of like, oh, this is how I fit myself into the economy to make money, or like this is how my business should operate, and this is what I should be pursuing. But it starts to kind of kill you a little bit. Like it will not like, you know, exploring things that you're passionate about and throwing those things away just to like fit in to society, or like do what's maybe it's like what like the whole like idea of like what's natural. Like, I mean, is any of this natural, like this world? So it's like, is the economy? So I don't know, like that goes kind of deeper, but just in general, like what society expects from you as opposed to what you want to do. Like,
and that's one of the critiques that Nietzsche had about Stoicism. It's like I forget the exact quote, but he's like, you Stoics who claim so much to care about being natural or neglect the most natural thing about humans, their passions. And that's because, like, mankind, we are incredibly good at making machines, and we have somehow convinced ourselves that we are good at making ourselves machines. That's not always true. Anyone who has tried to do anything meaningful in their life, meaningful whether it be
Mhm.
a external pursuit or some type of self-improvement, which, you know, most people have tried, they know that it's incredibly difficult to deal with a human being. And let's say if you're a parent, you know that like more than anyone else. But you know, if you are like a just even a marginally reflective person, you know that too. Like, you know what you should do, you know why you should do it, but for some reason, like, it's very difficult to actually push yourself to do so. And um humans are not these like, human nature is actually more like depraved than we give credit to. That's another thing I kind of like, I take issue as far as it is. It's like, well, human nature is actually pretty disgusting. And that's why humans, like, for me, we exist in nature, but we also have the ability to mold it, shape it, have dominion over it, however you want to put it. Like, we have like this weird capacity that is exclusive to us. And
Mhm.
to deny that as part of human nature, which is something that actually does contradict nature, because we are in war with nature, because you know, nature tries to kill
Mhm.
us on the daily, as we've seen these past couple years. um, it's well within our capacity and our reason to combat that, and for good reasons, and for, as we've seen, bad ones as well. So it's kind of up to us to have a meaningful philosophy. And if we just try to, sorry, did it cut out again? All right,
No,
okay,
no,
no,
you're good.
okay, good. And if we just try to rely solely on rationality and reason, then you can run into some really, really um
Dude,
weird trains of
I
logic.
I totally agree with you, because I actually had an argument with someone once about like it's of my belief or my thought process that morality itself is like almost irrational. You know, like I don't know if you ever saw like
Mm.
Jordan Peterson debate Sam Harris on like moral relativism.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of those videos, not all
Yeah,
of them.
but
Yeah.
just moral relativism in general.
Mhm,
It's like is like when a bear eats like the cubs of its enemy or whatever, like it like rolls up on a mama bear and eats the cubs, is that immoral or is that just nature? You
mhm,
know, like kills the offspring of like the other alpha that it just outed or whatever. Like to me, like that's just nature. Like if we just acted on our natural instincts, we would do a lot of fucked up shit. It's like is being in like a loving, committed relationship natural? Like probably not really, you know?
mhm,
Like we've kind of like human beings have kind of created these parameters and philosophies that are irrational to a certain degree, like faith, like religion,
mhm,
like that's irrational, but it has like led to productivity and less violence in society. Do you
mhm.
what do you think about that? That's kind of my thought process.
Yeah, so there's a lot of things you touched on that's like really interesting. So for example, like with the whole like morality, let's kind of start there, right? First and foremost, I think it's I should point out that I think morality is objective. I don't know what objective morality is, but I would kind of say I know it when I see it. So for example, like, here's the problem if we accept that morality is subjective, that morality is
Mm,
relativistic. If we accept that premise, or we accept that argument, we can no longer criticize like societies that got morality wrong. So for
mhm,
example, the antebellum South, like, and slavery. Like, if you can say to yourself morality is relative and it's dependent on society, then a society that got morality wrong, even to say that, you require some objective measuring stick.
yeah.
To be able to say that, you have to say that morality has some objective like capacity to it.
Mhm,
And if you don't, then you can't look at the South and say they weren't wrong for what they did to African Americans. You can't look at the American government and say that what they did to Native Americans wasn't wrong. You can't look to what Japan did in Nanking and say that wasn't wrong, when everyone who was a Japanese soldier decided to be complicit in the acts that happened there. You can't say any of those things were wrong if it's relativistic, because in their mind they were right. They thought they were right. Like, and
mhm,
like, maybe you'll say something like, oh, they were just following orders. I don't think that absolves anyone. Like,
mhm,
granted, I know the consequences of that, but I would feel like if people really cared about being moral and, let's say, like, standing up for something, like, they would require themselves to put themselves through that suffering to um stop the suffering that human beings are the most capable of. We're one of the few species on this earth that are able to commit torture, and we are the best at it. So
That's
we
fucked.
have to, yeah. So we have to have a philosophical
Mm.
like understanding and reasoning for these things. And I refuse to entertain that morality is subjective, because then the
Yeah.
first thing that happens is if enough people decide that their morality is the one that they're going to enforce and impose on other people, then like if there's enough of them, like I'm fucked. I'm one person, you know.
I
So
totally agree with everything you're saying. Like I think morality is objective. Like it's like
mhm.
just is what it is.
Now I do
Just like
think it's unique to humans, though. I will say that, like, because I won't make a moral statement on what the bear did. It's a
yeah,
bear.
that's what I'm saying. Yeah, that's what I'm kind of saying. Like um like Sam Harris, I actually used to like him a lot, but I don't even respect the guy anymore. I'll just call him out right now. Just 'cause some of the arguments he puts across, like we can just rationalize. He says we can rationalize our way to morality. That's like I don't want to. Okay, that's my perspective of what he's arguing. But like
Mhm,
he thinks like from what I perceive of what his argument is that human beings can rationalize themselves towards morality,
mhm,
and I think that's completely fucking wrong.
mhm,
Because like okay, let's say it's the apocalypse. The family next, I don't have any food or water for my family. The family next door has the food and water. I'm gonna kill them all, take their shit, save me and my own.
mhm.
Right? It's like, but that would be objectively wrong. But like
Right. Yeah.
rationally, it would make sense.
Mhm,
But people like Sam will say, "Oh well, you cooperating with your fellow man is still going to better your situation. Like, because if people know you're going around killing
mhm.
people, it's going to look bad. But like, there's so many times you could do the wrong thing and never get caught.
Right. And that's one of the key things. And like that's why, like, when it comes to philosophy, like I do recommend people just start with the Greeks, you know, for good reason. Like if you look at guys like Plato and Aristotle, right? So for example, like Plato had this really weird thought experiment called like it's in the Republic, the Callipolis, meaning the good city, the beautiful city. And it was that everyone should share everything communally. It was one of the first like it was a critique of Athens, which was a democracy, and it was to advocate that people should have things in common. And one of the things that they would have in common was family and kids, because his idea was, well, if every children is the child of all the adults, then all the children will be loved and all these things, right? But that's not the case. One thing that Aristotle pointed out was the number one thing people care about is what is theirs and what is their favorite. So if it is mine, I will care about it more. I care more about my brother than someone else's brother, for the sole reason that he's my brother. Like
Yeah.
anything else I critique about him as a person, we can, you know, if that was applied to someone else, you know, who knows what I would say as judge, right? But because he is my brother, I care about him more. And then the next thing is this. Let's say, for example, that, well, okay, there are 1,000 kids and there are like, you know, 2,000 adults. And you are told that all these adults are the parents of all these kids. And the question is this, like, would those kids in those societies be loved by 2,000 people, or 100% loved by 2,000 people, or would they receive 0.001% of love from 2,000 people? More
Huh.
likely the
Yeah.
latter. So as a result, there's that, right? And then when it comes to the whole rationalizing, like us to goodness, I actually find that more implausible, because I've just seen how, because you know, we can look at a single war in human history, just one, and out of our many, and just we can see how we rationalize all the ways we're evil on ourselves.
Yeah.
And to think that and one thing too is like we have made a lot of moral progress, and a lot of it for secular reasons, which I think is beautiful. Some of it also for, like, you know, there have been also some non-secular like reasoning and backing for that, for example. But however, you know, I don't think that it's completely out the question that we can rationalize morality. But if it becomes the only thing we have, there's a lot of dangerous places we can go with that. Because, for example, like, just straight up, there's some people in this world who are, if we decide to go with the whole rational thing, we can fall into utilitarianism really quickly. And the moment that kind of happens, where it's like, you know, like you're not as productive, you're not as smart, you're not as fit. Like, what's stopping me from throwing you off a cliff when you're a baby? You know, like
Yeah.
absolutely nothing. Like, whereas The number one thing that English common law is kind of based on is the whole premise and idea of natural law, which is that every single person is born with the natural right to life, liberty, and property. That's
Do you think without, this is like a pretty loaded question, but do you think without religion we would never have come to that conclusion? Like it's like the idea of everyone being like a divine human being. Like I know obviously religion's got all its problems and has caused all types of shit, but like I think like that's one thing religion has done for society. It's like kind of been like you're a divine being, I'm a divine being, so we're equal.
Yeah, because it's it's not always like, for example, like let's say like, oh, so to answer your question, I don't know, I really don't. But what I will say is that it is the case that that idea has religious motivations, and I don't think that that's a bad thing. But at the same time, I don't know if it's like if that would have happened any other way. But it just happened to be the case that that was how it happened. Because even with something like Buddhism or something like that, where there is no deity, when it comes to nirvana and when it comes to being enlightened, that is not exempt from anyone. So as a result, there is on that very spiritual divine basis, there is no claim as for you being superior to me. But then let's say we'll go to like a tribal environment, right? If there's maybe 8 of us, and there's 4 dudes, 4 women, the dude who is the most productive during the hunt, yeah, why wouldn't he like be the one to be in charge? Like, I'm not saying all the whole like women relationship stuff. That's a whole conversation. Like, I don't talk to girls. But it's just like if he's the most productive dude, he's the one who, like, let's say for example, and there's like a shit ton of other tribes around us, and because he exists, like we're safe. People are going to follow him. That's the whole reason why monarchies exist, because that was the case. And then you kind of get into the whole line of logic where it's just like, okay, he was really, really good at defending us. I bet his son would do a good job too, because he was raised by him. And then that maybe happens. Maybe that's the case. The prince is actually a really good guy to lead us. And then eventually the bloodline decays. They lose their mandate from heaven. And then a new, really strong guy in his lineage takes over. That's human history, right? But then we kind of get to a point where it's just like, that's very utilitarian and whatnot. But when you look at the decline and you look at the things that manifested during that, oftentimes it's because they violated the rights of other people. And as a result, they lost the consent of the governed. And then what grounds do we have as the mass population who are not in power, who do not want power, to say, like, I don't want to follow you or I disagree with you? It's the fact that I can claim that, in the eyes of a divine being or in natural law, you and I are the same. Like, if all things were equal, even if you have all these other advantages, yeah, you are entitled to all the property that you can make with your own labor, and so am I, and you cannot take mine and I cannot take yours. So, like, whether that can happen with or without religion, don't know. But I think it's beautiful that I don't, but it's very beautiful to me that it is something that came about. And it's one of the best things ever, because like, I, for one, enjoy all of the liberties and rights I have being here in the United States. Something that I find somewhat appalling with people my age and of my demographic, because I don't know if you've noticed, I am of East Asian descent.
Really?
Right. And then, but every now and then, like, sometimes, like, I'm in a very, like, some people have more, and first and foremost, I'll start out by saying this. I think people who have more left-leaning ideologies and political theories, they have good intentions. Some of them do, yeah. Communal policies are very popular because it's just like, yeah, it's fucking sick, fucking cool. And it's very popular among students. Now, one thing I always ask these students or my classmates is, okay, communal things are good. Distribution of wealth. All right, let's do that with GPA. Your grade is no longer going to be your grade, and it's actually going to help my grade because my grade sucks.
We should also have a distribution of gains.
Yeah,
like,
right.
It's not fair that some guys are more jacked than us, dude. Like, we gotta.
It's just like you gotta spread, like, doing all that. You gotta spread it around. It's just like not cool, like, right? So it's just like, all right, cool, roadblock there. But at the same time, they have good ideas as far as, like, they have a good way of identifying problems, because there is a problem of inequality, there is a problem of, like, social responsibilities and all these other things. But at the same time, like a lot of the things that they propose is just kind of ham-fisted, not really thought out thoroughly. And then you look on the conservative side of things, which is conservatives have two problems in my estimation. The first one being is that conservatives, what are the main things conservatives do? They try to uphold family values or traditional values. The problem with that is their concept of family values and traditional values are things that didn't really exist. I want America to stay the way it was when it was in the 60s and 70s. It's like, all right, cool. When we were racist and we beat our wives, like, that's not always like it's very easy for a conservative to glorify and romanticize the past and not address the issues that liberals tend to bring up. Now, the solutions they bring up are also kind of like, I'm not a fan of that. The reason I brought up the whole like I'm Asian thing is because I come from a nation that was war torn for hundreds of years, and a lot of those immigrants who just were tired of that came over to America. Obviously, like a lot of the Chinese immigrants came during Gold Rush, but when you look at like other things that happened in the Cold War, Vietnam, Korea, the Khmer Rouge in I'm blanking on the country itself. I want to say Cambodia, but maybe I'm wrong. There's a Burma and all those other nations that were just absolutely wrecked and fucked by communist governments.
Yeah.
Why would I endorse that? Now, with that being said, capitalism isn't like hands-free clean either. However, we can't neglect the fact that it has caused us to have the most amount of liberties, and it has done the most to alleviate poverty. Yes, it increased inequalities, but it also decreased poverty and world hunger. So there's good and bad things about both of these things. And that's why for me, like first and foremost, when I talk to people who will have because nowadays everyone's like very divisive, something I always bring up is that I respect conservatives for wanting to like uphold good moral values and implementing it in a way that doesn't violate freedoms and whatnot. But one thing I also point out is that when it comes to, let's say, liberals, right? They were the ones who kind of came up with that as a thing. The whole natural law concept, that's a liberal concept, And sometimes I feel like people kind of forget the origins of their own ideas. And liberalism and conservatism.
That's a great point.
They've just been they've been so watered down and taken so far away from their own things that classical liberalism is now considered right-leaning.
Well, 100%, man. Because I have a very similar perspective to you. It's like I'm not like some crazy conservative, but now just having like a classic liberal take, it just puts you on the right side of the spectrum, right?
Yeah. And it's sad too, because like for example, we talked about this, and I don't necessarily hide it, but I also don't like just broadcast it to the world. But I am a Second Amendment like advocate, like maybe even a bit stronger of a position than just an advocate.
Oh, dude, I'm no questions asked. No one's taking my fucking gun, dude.
Hell yeah, dude.
I'm Canadian. No one's taking. They want to take my fucking gun. They're not getting.
Yeah, I know your guys' like stuff is even crazier than ours. Like,
and it's not even about like the argument between like, oh, you're on the left, I'm on the right. It's like, no, you're like a hardcore commie. And I'm actually a liberal.
Right.
It's like fucking man. It's like everything that, like when I hear the word liberal, I hear like freedom. Okay, so
freedom, personal identity, and all these kind of things, like the freedom to like life, liberty, and property, like liberal ideas, right there. Like those are all things. Like, and then go ahead. Sorry, keep cutting.
It's just, like up here in Canada, man. It's like even with COVID and shit like that, shit got so out of hand. It was like you had everyone mandatory this, mandatory that, do this or you lose your fucking job. Can't leave the country. Like I'll go into that, man. Like when it came to that shit, I was one of the unclean. So I was the one who couldn't. Luckily, I'm self-employed, so it didn't really fuck with me economically. It's like, fuck you.
Yeah.
You can't do shit, bud. But like I couldn't leave the country. I couldn't get on a plane. I couldn't get on a train. So shit like that. Here it's like you can go to like jail or like face criminal fines if you don't like use the right pronouns. And it's just getting more and more intense, man. Like they're coming after people's guns and shit. Like it's just, like if you're a liberal, to me, that's like you're a fucking, like you believe in liberty. Like I don't even know what that means. Like progressives, like, sure, like, I think every reasonable person's like, hey, how about we take the lessons from the past
Mm-hmm.
and like look to our past and be like, okay, we fucked up here, but we got this right. Now,
Mm-hmm.
how can we progress as a society? Like, you should have like a balancing act between these two sides. But now it's just like fucking the left has gone psycho. So now everyone's just holding on and getting pulled.
Mm-hmm.
Or, yeah, I don't know. You can touch on that.
Yeah, and like honestly, like it doesn't help too that like at least in America, like both sides are equally crazy in my opinion, and that's
Yeah.
why I think like the whole political thing is kind of in a mess right now because like as divisive as we are, we also like there's two problems when it comes to American politics. The first one is that it's always been divisive. I mean, after George Washington like stopped being president and people had to actually like, ask hard questions about life, everything that he kind of warned against kind of happened because it just naturally would. People are divisive by nature. Like um I consider it a miracle at how peaceful we have been, like all things considered. Granted, obviously there's like really big stains in American history, big ones, but for the most part we were making progress toward things right. But here's the issue that a lot of things kind of happen, right? If two opposing sides can still trust each other to negotiate, then peace is still a possibility. Once that kind of deteriorates, peace is almost impossible. Like I have to be willing to trust you for me to negotiate with you. Um, at the halls of Congress, right before the start of the American Civil War, you know, politicians were carrying their firearms into Congress for self-defense reasons, and like it's because they didn't trust the other person on the other side to have a meaningful and peaceful discussion, um, and
They're
that's
they
like
were
that's yeah, and the thing is like when it comes like bringing it back to a little bit of the using the Second Amendment example, the thing is like, do I wish gun violence and innocent deaths were not a thing? Yes, I 100% do. Do I know the exact way that we're going to stop all those things? No, I do not. But do I think that I reserve the right to defend myself against any person who decides to try to take my own life and someone else's? Yes. And I think it's incredibly irresponsible to say, hey, the person who is going to try to kill you has a gun, but that's illegal. So I need you to have a knife instead. There's a reason why
yeah.
people say don't bring a gun to a knife fight. And then here's the other part. Let's say like, for political unrest reasons, something happens, right? If the Second Amendment, like the purpose of it is this: it's to have a well-regulated militia and the right to bear arms, right? Who is the militia? That's one of the comments people make. We are. That's just the people. The people are the militia. We reserve the right to like change, modify, and remove people from office if they no longer have the consent of the government, the consent of the governed. Now, here's the problem with that though. I know for a fact that there are some, God bless their soul, but some really hardcore patriots who, when shit hits the fan, they're going to start imposing their laws and their rules on me. And
Fuck
I
yeah,
reserve,
brother.
yeah, right. It's like, woo, and I and I reserve the right to defend myself from them just as much as I do from a tyrannical government. I like the
Yeah.
right to bear arms. It's the defense from a government that loses the consent of the people. It's a thing that protects you from other people trying to take your livelihood away, and it's a way to defend from like foreign powers and whatnot. And I reserve to have that right, and I don't want to give that right up for anything, because in what way am I able to ensure that I maintain the first and most important right, the freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom from religion, and all these other like great rights that we enjoy that we just take for granted on the daily because we fail to understand the things that prompted them. Like there's a reason why a lot of countries nowadays refuse to have a monarchy. Even early civilizations rejected it because they just know how easy it is for a monarchy to turn really sour. There's a reason why like people like to glorify Rome and Sparta and all these things, right? Rome is the example I'm going to use right now. One of the things that they did before the whole empire became an empire under Caesar, it had two consuls and they were only allowed to rule for a year. So you have 1 year to do something great for Roman society and then you're out. Like
Shit.
because and the reason why they did that is because they had, I think, maybe 3 or 4 tyrants in a row, and they're just like, yeah, we're sick of this. Like, fuck kings, fuck a one person in power, and everything like that. And we see single party systems all over the world having these issues. Like, for example, in my, I'm like mixed as hell, but in one of the countries I hail from, China, you have videos of people or the government, using like torching the doors shut of apartment buildings, and then sometimes those apartment buildings catch fire. Like, that's not what's up. That's not what I'm trying to. That's not what's up. That's very millennial.
Yeah.
That's not the vibe, bro.
That's not
like
the vibe.
that's not the vibe, dude. Like, I don't like that.
Trying to burn alive in here.
Yeah, like, and I like, for me, it's
See,
I don't want to force my rights and my beliefs on any other person, and I want to be able to defend myself from anyone who thinks that they deserve that, or they reserve the right to do so. Like, it's like, no. So
it's kind of funny too for me. Like my personal journey. One thing that's interesting is how like philosophy just ties into political. Like, it's like you can't actually separate the two, because because like if you have a philosophical belief, it's clearly going to influence your political beliefs. Like, there's no way around that. So that's one interesting point I wanted to make. And then another one is, I grew up quite liberal. Like, I played in a band. Like, I grew up as an artist, and I was very like, I smoked a bunch of weed, and I was like really like lefty and like woo woo back in the day. And there's still aspects of me that are like that to a certain extent. But just as I was growing up, and like, what's that saying where it's like, if you're not a liberal when you're younger, you don't have a heart, and if you're not a conservative when you're older, you don't have a brain.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's like 100% true, but like for me, as I grew, I started to see like people just doing a lot of like self-sabotaging shit, and how like just certain narratives, whether that be like the feminist narrative or just like these far left radical ideas that started with like a grain of truth. It started with something that was like, okay, yeah, fair enough.
It's
like,
an issue, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, like racism. Yeah, racism bad. I agree. Racism bad. Okay. But then it's like, but fuck white people now. It's like, okay, well, that's actually racism. So like, what have you solved? Sorry. Where it's like,
that's why one thing I tell people is like, you can be like, we accept bigotry toward ideas on the daily basis, and we are becoming increasingly more comfortable with accepting bigotry toward people on a daily basis as well. So what do I mean by that? If I asked you, like, do you hate Nazis? The correct answer should be, yeah, I do. We are intolerant to Nazi ideology. Same way that I'm intolerant toward like the policies of Mao, for example. Like, I'm against those things, right? It's okay to be intolerant toward people who buy into them. It's okay to be intolerant toward the ideas that they present. But let's say I meet a Nazi, I meet a communist, or a really hardline one too. Like, someone who's like, sees the means of production and like fuck everyone else, right? Like, if I meet them, I'm still going to treat them with respect, because I'm not bigoted toward a person. I'm not going to generalize a person based on one of the beliefs they might hold. I have many friends who have political beliefs and political leanings that I personally disagree with. However, they're still some of my best friends, and I would literally die for them, and I would exercise my Second Amendment right to defend them, even though they don't like the Second Amendment. Like, it's okay. Because we, like I said, we're okay with being bigoted towards ideas, like, being anti-racism, being anti-poverty and everything like that. But then when you apply that to people, like anti-racism, right? Where like everyone now is like, the whole world is fucked because of privileged white men. It's like, oh, like, really now? Like, that's the best reason you can give as to why the world is messed up.
You're literally just lumping people into categories and being like, okay, what privileges do I have that you don't have? And then people will be like, oh, well, you're white and people treat you different. I'm like, one's if you're a rich black person who's had like generational wealth, you fucking drive a Bugatti, and I make fucking minimum wage working at a fucking gas station, and I'm white. Like, who's more privileged? It's like everyone is an individual, and I think that's a big problem. Is people are just like, what's it called, like intersectionalism?
Perhaps I'm not too familiar on that. Like, and go ahead.
Just putting everybody into a box based on like features that they can't control, like skin color. Like, I thought we agreed that was bad.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and then, but it's okay if we do it to white people. And and I, for one, support that. Just kidding.
Just fuck you, bud.
It's like, it's about time, Just kidding, man. Yeah, like,
funny as fuck.
Dude, like, anyway, but yeah, like, and that's one thing I kind of dislike a lot. It's that, and I feel bad too, like, about like, because you know, anti-racist racism, anti-bigot bigotry, these are all things that have real consequences, because then if we just say like, oh, white people don't deserve any type of economic health and support because of like the inequalities of the past, it's like, well, they were unequal, like even amongst white people for the longest time. If you were Catholic, you weren't recognized as white, or if you were Irish, you weren't recognized as white. Like there's a lot of different things that kind of play into this too. And like, yes, inequality due to like certain social classes or group belongings, that is a real thing.
Yeah, it
But
still doesn't even have anything. Yeah,
but
it's
it doesn't have, but like the solutions don't have anything to do on the group, you know?
yeah,
Like
but there's
that's
a
why
lot of
collective guilt is so stupid.
the collective guilt stupid, and also like the victim Olympics, oppression Olympics. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
how's that? Like, let's just say, like we always say in lifting, like if someone came up to you and be like, "Oh, I can't get big because my genetics are shit, and I can't afford to buy food, and blah blah blah," and like it's like, shut the fuck up, like stop
Mm-hmm.
being you wouldn't be like, "Oh yeah, you're right, your genetics suck, so you should not try." It's like,
Mm-hmm.
but that's, as a society, we go, "Oh yeah, because your skin color is this, you are inherently at a disadvantage, and you will never win because of this guy over here."
Mm-hmm.
It's like,
Yeah.
imagine like on a micro level and a macro level, it's like, that's not gonna breed winners. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, definitely. And you know, like uh for example, I'll speak on like something a bit more like, I guess, that I'm allowed to speak on. This is a really weird tangent, all right, but I'm gonna bring it up. I hated the Shang-Chi movie, that Marvel movie, the Chinese one. I hated it.
I haven't seen it. I don't watch
You
Marvel
don't need
movies.
to. It's okay. Like, but the reason why I bring it up is because it did something that I found so, I guess, like disingenuous, and that is, maybe like, don't know if this is the proper like channel for it, but it's okay,
No, do it
because
up.
you're very open-minded, and I
Anything
appreciate
here,
that.
man. Anything goes.
Something I don't like about like that movie is that it continues to perpetuate or it continues to push the idea of the perpetual foreigner. Like me, growing up in America, born in America, I only speak English. I'm very disconnected from my own mainland culture. Even more than that, the moment I go to the Philippines, I look incredibly different. First and foremost, I'm 6 foot. Like how many 6 foot Filipinos do you meet on a daily basis? Like it's very clear when I go there, I don't look like them. On top of that, like my skin complexion is like not the same as most Filipinos. So I stick out like a sore thumb there, and I stick out like a sore thumb here. When I went into the military, I was one of the first Asian people some people have ever met in their life. So like the reason why I didn't like that Shang-Chi movie is because it continued to show like the whole perpetual foreigner thing, that a Asian story is only interesting if the Asian goes back to China. And I was just like, fuck that. Like I like and like Tony Leung, great actor, like there's some great scenes, there's some great things about it, but for the most part I was just like, after like the hype died down and I was kind of like, hey, kung fu cool, and like that went away, I was like, wait a minute, this movie was kind of shit. And then I kind of thought through it, I was like, it didn't represent anything about me, and it just tried to appeal. It just tried to show like what China's like and whatever like that. It's like that's not what Asian Americans are like at all. And the thing is, the reason why I bring that up is because when it comes to this whole like race thing, it's so nuanced, it's so different, it's so full of like all these other things that it becomes incredibly difficult to generalize any of it. So why do we keep trying to? We've seen how bad that can get with things like that we've enacted in our policy, whether that be like segregation post the Civil War, or it be the Japanese internment camps. And I lived in Washington for a couple of years. Do you know how many? There's at least 3 different Chinese reconciliation parks because of all the acts that the Washington government did to Chinese immigrants, and some of them were called expulsion acts, which was another way of saying we lynched a bunch of Chinese people. Like we see why it's not always the best idea to just generalize races, because we completely diminish them to something that is one out of their control, and it makes it seem as if they are no longer human, and I hate that. And that's why it's just like, yes, I'm an Asian male, you're a white male, but that's not the most interesting about
I'm
me.
not white, bro.
Oh, you're not?
I identify as something else. Oh, just kidding.
Had me, bro. I fell for it.
Are you assuming, dude? You just
are you assuming,
bro? You literally just assumed my race and my gender. You're fucked, bud.
Like like one after the other, like
holy
like
fuck,
in the span
man.
of a second, you know. So
Immediately canceled. No, I totally agree.
yeah, so
Like,
it's just horrible. And like, don't get me wrong, I don't downplay the inequalities that happen as a result. But at the same time, like any solution we put forward can't be as bad as the problems that created it, you know?
mhm,
Like
100%.
that's my thing. Yeah.
Yeah, like up here in Canada, it's different, obviously, because our history is different.
Mhm.
It's the Aboriginals here. That was
Right.
we did a lot of fucked up shit, like
Mhm.
Canadians. We as
Mhm.
in whatever my ancestors or whoever, um,
Mhm.
did a lot of fucked up shit, and there's still like a lot of problems. But like the issue there too is like the government just tries to throw money at the problem, and the problem
Mhm.
doesn't go away. Like if
Mhm.
anything, it just causes more of an issue. It's like I think like sometimes like the way to I don't know, man. I don't have like the fucking answers to all this shit, but like there's
Yeah, me neither, like
so many things that like I'm not even allowed to like just me even talking about this or like being like, well,
Mhm.
maybe if like we did this or like if just talking about the issue and being like, well, throwing money at the problem isn't helping. Like
Mhm.
you can't just like it's like okay, let's say there's like a poor population. Like
Mhm.
anyone who knows anything about economics, like if you redistribute did like wealth redistribution in like 5 to 10 years, everything would be exactly the same. The people that were rich would become rich again, and the people
Mhm.
that were poor would become poor again because
Mhm.
the rich people knew how to handle like man. There's obviously specific cases where someone just like inherited a bunch of money or whatever, but even
Mhm.
in those cases, a lot of those people actually end up going broke. I think
Yeah.
actually like learning about economics is interesting because you learn a lot about human behavior
Mhm.
and you learn about like really like the only thing that separates you from like the privileged or the wealthy or the people that you look to in society as winners is just like mindset because there's tons
Mhm.
of like and then you get into the argument like, well, is free will an illusion? That's also another thing because it's like, well, can you even learn? Like, if you get brought up a certain way, will you ever be capable of becoming something else?
Mhm. Mhm.
Does that make sense? Like the way you get taught certain things, you don't. So you're not going to ever have the like you're just a product of your environment. I guess I could say
Right, right.
that's the whole inequality thing too. It's like, are there certain people that are literally just destined to fail?
Mhm.
I don't believe that. I don't believe that at all. I believe every single person is an
Interesting.
individual and they can fucking climb their way up.
Right. So I don't disagree with you entirely. What I will say though is that I do think that there are some people who, no matter how hard they climb, they won't be like the best at anything. Like for example, I'm not going to be the best basketball player, like no matter how hard I work.
Yeah, yeah.
So
So let me clarify
yeah,
maybe.
yeah, 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 yeah.
So I don't mean like yes. So like obviously I'm not going to be fucking the best bodybuilder in the world just based
Mhm.
off like certain things. I'm more saying like if you want to be wealthy or you want to like succeed and live a happy life and not be like one of these like let's talk about it economically. Like if you're like
Yeah, yeah. Mhm.
below the poverty line, anybody can rise above the poverty line if they just like apply themselves. Rather than not they might not become Elon Musk, but
Right, right, right. Mhm.
they can be like economically healthy. That's what I'm saying. Like they can, rise up the economic hierarchy is what I'm saying.
Yeah. So I think so the way I approach a lot of these things, and for the most part, me personally, fundamentally, I actually agree with you more. However, the thing is that I've kind of like exposed myself to our experience is that you know there's limitations to every single belief that we have, and one of them that I found is like, for example, in the military, if you score below a certain ASVAB score, you can't be in the military. Like you just lack the mental capacity to handle the military, which is not even the most mentally like comprehensive thing in the world. But the interesting consequence, or the maybe the sad consequence of these things, is that some people just actually lack a like capacity for a lot of things, and the appropriate answer is that, well, they can just pull themselves up by their bootstraps, which I think applies to at least 98% of people.
Mm,
But then it's just like, what should we do about the 2%? And that's the really hard question. It's just like, well, do we demean them? Do we do like a welfare state is not good in this scenario, but what about for these people who literally can't do something?
yeah.
Now, those things are really, really rare, and a lot of people self-diagnose themselves as that thing well
Yeah.
before they even need to. So I think that there's a huge issue here. But the thing is, like, I do think that when it comes to people, improvement is not exclusive, like it's to a certain type of people. anyone can improve. Anyone can get better. Now, what does better actually look like? That will vary for reasons that are somewhat out of our control, and some of them well within our control. And if we maximize all the things that are within our control, then that's what we should do, because that's what we can do. Like in general, like that which we can do is what we should do, type of deal.
Yeah, I like that.
But the high, like, the highs, and the peaks and all that kind of stuff, like, who's to say what that is? And you'll only find out as a result of doing your best. But the consequence of that is you have to, or a consequence of that is to investigate what happens when someone's best is poverty. Because I don't think it takes much imagination to think about a person we have ever encountered in our life and just thought to ourselves, like, oh man, like, thank God you were born into, like, this age, like,
yeah, fair enough. No, I see that. That's a good point. Yes, it's like you think about people that have handicaps, or they have something like disabilities that, like, they're gonna fall through the cracks in certain ways, right?
Exactly.
And that's not to say they should play the victim route and, like, not try to better themselves in some capacity. Because, like, me, it like, not to be disrespectful, but if I went up to someone in a wheelchair and I said, just walk, like, pull yourself up by your, like, that's like clearly like I'm a fucking idiot.
You can't walk, bro. Like, you can't just tell your legs to move. The fuck?
Yeah. So it's like, not to be disrespectful, like, I'm just using that as an example. It's like,
yeah.
In that case, I think there should be, like, social security, and there should be, like, welfare for those people. But up here in Canada, that's the problem too, though. It's like finding a way to like vet people properly, because there are up here in Canada, man. Like, I have a moving company, and we would do a lot of social, or a lot of, like, company, or like government assisted programs would hire us, like, contract us out to, like, move people that were disabled, or the people that were on living assistance, I guess you could say. And just, there were people that we would move sometimes, and it's like, I'm not judging, I don't know exactly what's going on, but they were just abusing the system, like, hardcore. You could just tell, man. They had, like, they're getting their $2,500 a month, or whatever they got paid, $2,000 a month, and they were just sucking on the tit of the government, pretty much.
Right. And it sucks that happens, but at the same time, I don't want to punish the people who actually need it by like scaling back all the things that are happening because of the people who abuse it. And that's a shitty part about human nature, which is, like, that's why, like, one thing, touching back as to why I appreciate the philosophy, like, education, is that I don't know more as a result of pursuing it, but I just feel like I just have the ability to understand things a bit better, and and that ability to understand things just makes it even harder to have, like, strong opinions. Now, there's probably, like, some strong opinions I have, like, if you can work out, you should. Like, let's start there.
Mandatory that everyone
workouts. Yeah, you gotta get swole, bro. Protein shakes at 5 and, like, protein bars at 8. Like, come on now, you got to do this.
It's kind of funny though, because I feel that lifting kind of almost changes your philosophical stance or your political stance slightly, or it can anyway. Like,
yeah, definitely.
Because it kind of, we made a joke about, like, the redistribution thing. Like, it sounds like ridiculous for me to say, like, if someone works harder than me in the gym, is more disciplined, gets super fucking jacked, it'd be ridiculous to be like, hey, that's not fair. You're more jacked than me. Like, we need to redistribute this muscle mass. Like, you can't, like, redistribute people's hard work. So there's obviously, like, but I don't know. There's a lot to that conversation. I like how we've talked about, like, philosophy for over, like, an hour and 15 minutes.
Yeah, dude. Like, the thing is, like,
that's what's awesome.
Yeah, people think that philosophy is just this whole, like, I like this word because it makes me sound smart. People think that philosophy is this, like, ethereal thing that exists out there, like, for us to try to understand. No, philosophy is literally, like, what we do in our day-to-day life, like, sorry to get all, like, Asian mystic again, but the word kung fu, right? People, like, we think kung fu, we think Jackie Chan, we think Bruce Lee. That's not what it really means. Kung fu just means, like, pursued greatness, really, like craft. Like, if you are a carpenter and you have good kung fu, that means you're a good carpenter. Like, that's all it means. It just means competency, essentially. it's something tangible, it's something real, it's something like exists in the world that we can interact with. That's what philosophy is. Philosophy, it's not just like it's not just thinking to yourself what, why, how, and all these kinds of things. It's kind of like you always have to relate it back to what we can touch, what we can feel. That's why, like, if one of the most popular paintings in philosophy is a painting of Plato and Aristotle having a conversation, and Plato is walking and he's doing this, like he's pointing up high. Because one of the things that Plato believed in is a world of forms, that what we see is just a reflection. Like the the ideal man, the ideal state. These are all things that exist in the world above, you know, and they exist out there. We just have reflections of them on here on Earth, but we can't fully materialize them quite yet. And then next to him is Aristotle, who has his hand like this, like trying to find my camera, where his hand is right here. And the reason why he does that is because he's saying, listen here, but we live in a material world. And that's what we have control over. That's what we interact with on the day-to-day basis. So our philosophy should incorporate that just as much as your immaterial world of forms, which Aristotle kind of disagreed with. So philosophy, it's very fun.
Also, it's more tangible. Like it's not like this fluffy thing. Something that you battle with every day to some extent.
Yeah.
So, like me, I just think like this is just like self-talk, like things that go around in my head. But you're actually pursuing it as like a major, so you're fucking way in the weeds.
It's interesting because, like, you know, like I said, I appreciate how I can learn something and actually feel like I know less afterward. And I think that's like, it takes, I don't know, maybe a dumbass to like think that's comforting, but like I actually think that's how you kind of approach life, because like the world is just so much bigger than myself. Like, who am I to say that I can learn everything about it? Like
I feel like the more you know, the more you know you don't know. You know, like you become like when you like first get into lifting, you feel like you have all the answers, and the more you start to understand things, you're like, oh, I don't fucking know shit. These people know so much more than me, or there's just so much more to be known. And that's like life in general. The more you know you don't know. You just become I know nothing.
Right. Because like for me, like I always try to, at least I try to, like I try to be cognizant of it, but sometimes, you know, I'm just speaking to a camera, so maybe I don't think about it like in that moment. But I always try to frame things as, I believe this. Like, I believe X, I believe Y. I believe if you do things this way, this is going to be the result that happens. I state it in that way, and then I provide you with my reasoning for that, and I hope to provide you with compelling evidence in support of what I believe, and a rational line of logic that makes sense for you to buy into why I am advocating what I'm advocating. But I feel like I'm not a biologist. I don't have a degree in kinesiology. I don't have like all the educational backgrounds to say like I can definitively prove to you how muscles are built. I don't fucking know. All I know is it's like if you lift heavy things with a good form that actually targets the muscle, and you do that for a good amount of time, you're going to be a lot bigger if you make sure to eat, you know. Like, it's just like that's it, you know, like but you know, knowing, a lot of people want to pride themselves in knowing, and I think that's good, because like I think it's good that there's people in the world who are much smarter than myself, who can actually like interact with those things. But I feel like nowadays people are starting to almost pretend that they know, but no,
I think that takes for
me. Like I just try to believe.
Yeah, I think it takes the magic out of life too if you just think you know everything. Like, isn't it beautiful that you don't know things? Like, the universe is a mystery. Why are, like, dude, literally, like when I was younger in my early 20s, I think you've probably seen the video where I was talking about like psychedelics and stuff like that.
Yeah, I do. I watched that one. Yeah,
dude, I used to take like heavy doses of psychedelics, and those things would just make you, like, the very fabric of existence would like fall apart, and you would have these like very intense, I don't even know, like transcendent experiences. Anybody who's had a psychedelic experience can probably relate. But that kind of got me going on some of these, where you just kind of go through life and you're like, dude, why are we here? Like, how did this happen? Just these like really deep. I think you can find peace in just not knowing why, but just trying to do your best to understand things. Like being like,
Mhm.
I don't know why, and I don't necessarily know what the best way to live is, but I believe that this is the best way. Like you can have your beliefs, right?
Mhm.
But you fundamentally you don't know, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Even in your personal life, you don't know that if I make this decision, it's going to lead me to a better future versus if I
Mhm.
make this decision. You don't know. You believe this decision will lead you to a better future, but at the end of the day, you don't know.
Yeah. And I think bringing that back to fitness is like it's okay. Like what you have to do is like try to find something you believe in and act on it, commit yourself to it, and see what happens. And then you'll like hindsight's 2020. You can derive knowledge and know something about from it from there. But if you try to do that beforehand, that's why a lot of people nowadays when they're just like, well, what's the optimal program? What's the optimal this? What's the optimal that? It's like, dude, like that's why I say optimal is a process. It's optimization. It's not something that you like study, read about, and then learn about, and then like you create something that is now optimal. You create something, you apply it, you take data, you take information, and then you cater things to go in the direction you wanted to, and that's optimal.
Mm.
So like nothing, and in that whole thing, right? Nothing is exempt and nothing is glorified, you know. Like I'm a huge like big mover bias kind of guy where I'm just like fucking yeah, barbell squats, bench and deadlift is fucking sick. I love those movements. But at the same time, like with what I mentioned, if you're finding that they're not working for you and you're following my content and it's not working for you, you have no loyalty to say to be like, well, I have to do these exercises. You don't. In the
Mm.
same way that if I don't find it compelling to at the moment do those really small isolations that target a certain part of the muscle in a very specific kind of way, if I'm not finding any use for it right now, I don't need to, but that doesn't eliminate it from its utility in the future, which is why I think nowadays when people try to find optimal, they just want to find the one answer. And in all things, one answer is not the right answer.
Mm. Cool, man. Wow, that was an epic conversation. We should
Yeah.
probably wrap this thing up because I kind of got to pee. I don't know if I can.
True, and I'm like running out of brain. Like about an hour and a half is about as
Oh,
long as I can be like
woo!
a little bit intelligent, right?
Awesome, man. Well, that was good.
Yeah.
I like this. Like what I'm trying to do with the podcast now is having more conversations with people that it's like not just going to be all just lifting, right? I want to get
Mhm.
into more like these kinds of topics. So that was good.
Yeah, I appreciate that because like even on my channel, I don't even know how to show myself more, the exception of anything.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
I was actually gonna say, man, it'd be cool if you kind of somehow incorporated the philosophical discussions.
yeah, yeah.
I know you do to a certain extent, but
Mhm.
it'd be I don't know, it's something you could even dive into a little bit more because I was quite entertained listening to you. So
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, it is in the plans. So right now I have a couple plans. Like first and foremost, I think the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a series of videos kind of breaking down critical thinking. Like now, I don't think I'm an expert in the thing, but I just, I'm just going to share with you what I was taught and what I believe to be the case. And then give you tools that I think are going to be worthwhile. And then from there, I'm going to dive into like some deeper discussions about things like, philosophy, like political and social philosophy, philosophy of religion, existentialism, stoicism, and like kind of give my view on things. Cause I feel like a lot of people nowadays, we don't trust ourselves to question things. And the only way that we can have a compelling answer is if it's an answer that's genuine to us and comes from us. So that's why I think philosophy is so beautiful. So yeah.
cool, man. Cool. Well, let's wrap this up, man. If you can let
Yeah.
people know where they can find you, that'd be great.
Yeah, so on YouTube, Stand Strength, YouTube channel, focus on building muscle, getting bigger. Whole message of my channel is to start where you stand, start where you need to do things, and focus on what you can control. And aim high, but aim at the first thing in front of you. And then on Instagram, Stand Strength as well. So those are the only two places that I'm like on a fairly regular basis.
Sounds good, man. Well, I appreciate you coming on.
Thanks, bro. Had a good time.